Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Secrets of Dream Companies Revealed. This webinar is being recorded and everyone will receive a copy of the slides and the recording in the next day or two. And if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, we encourage you to submit them at any time using the chat function in the bottom of your screen. So today we are discussing the key to attracting and retaining great employees by building dream companies, and why building a dream company is more important than providing employees with their dream job. My name is Megan Berry, and I am on the marketing team at Bright Horizons, and we would like to thank you all for joining us. So to start off, I wanted to introduce one of our speakers, Andrea Wicks-Bowles. She is a Senior Consultant and Director of Global Initiatives at Horizons Workforce Consulting. Andrea works with clients to enhance the effectiveness of employee contributions through talent management strategies that strengthen the organizational position as an employer of choice. Thank you for being here, Andrea.
Oh, absolutely.
Our next speaker is Helen Zarba, the Vice President of Learning Services and Organizational Development here at Bright Horizons. Helen is responsible for maximizing the impact of enterprise-wide integrated talent management and has played a pivotal developmental role at Bright Horizons for 7 years. We will get to Helen's part of the presentation a little bit later, but I wanted to make sure that you all knew that she was here.
Hello, everyone.
So before we get started, I wanted to ask everyone a quick poll question and to learn a little bit more about our audience. So we want to know, what are your HR responsibilities at your organization? And if there's more than one, feel free to check as many as you need, and we'll give you a minute to fill that out. Great, we see a couple coming through. Give you another few seconds to fill that out, and then we will show everyone who's on the line today. Great, so we can see we're skewing a little bit towards the benefits audience, but definitely have a wide variety of attendees here. So thank you all for joining us. And at this point, Andrea, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everybody. Looking forward to this conversation this afternoon. And I'm really pleased to see in this poll that we have a nice cross-section of the HR community. Before I get started, though, I just wanted to acknowledge yesterday's challenges in Brussels and give a shout out to any of you HR folks that have employees outside of the U.S., specifically in Europe, and equally as important, obviously, in Brussels. And just to mention that some of you on the call may be aware, we at Bright Horizons have developed something years ago that continues to be a vital resource that we make available. It's a piece called What Happened to the World. And it was written for employees of our clients to share with young children during times of duress. So, for example, many of our clients distributed it to their employees during Hurricane Katrina and other big challenges. It has been translated into French and is available if you would like to share it with your employee counterparts in Brussels, because I do think that having conversations in the family about these trying times can be a challenge and can certainly be stressful for families and working parents. So if that is something of interest, do send us a note in the chat or let us know somehow, and we'll be sure to get you a PDF that you're welcome to share. All right, so that really wasn't part of it, but let's go ahead and get started. A dream company. Today I want to share with you the results of a survey that we conducted last year and have created an approach to how organizations can structure their human resource practices and benefits and overall human capital strategy to become what we're calling a dream company. Now, at Horizons Workforce Consulting, we work with our clients to support their ability to understand the current needs of their employee population, anticipate challenges in the future, as well as to design approaches that are strategic, that meet specific business goals, and can be customized for different workforce populations. And we use typically a well-being approach, which is a much more holistic snapshot of the needs of the workforce. along those lines, Dr. Lucy English, who is our Director of Research, put together an interesting approach that leveraged our holistic well-being and leveraged the best thinking around engagement surveys. And in fact, engagement metrics clearly are vital to our clients. Whenever you do leadership interviews with senior managers, you know that a lot of times the engagement scorecard is top of mind when trying to figure out strategies that support business objectives. And we recognize that as well. Lucy looked at those metrics and in assessing how it was designed realized, the focus of engagement is understanding the needs of the individual from the perspective of how they feel about their job and how they feel about the environment where they're working. At Bright Horizons, we think of that as job passion and commitment to the organization. And it wasn't too long before we started talking about it as dream job versus dream company. So we set out to explore which one of those has the most impact both on individual well-being, individual effectiveness, and business outcomes. And that's how we got to our dream company study. So last year, as I mentioned, we did a study, and we heard from well over 4,000 full-time U.S.-based working adults. Lucy put together an electronic survey that went out and asked lots of different questions, questions around well-being and how people feel and how people are doing in their lives at work and lives outside of work, lots of demographic information, and two key areas of inquiry. How do you feel about your job and a number of questions associated with that, and how do you feel about the organization where you're working? A few comments on our demographic response. A nice response rate. About 56% of respondents had been with their organizations over 5 years. So that means folks who've been at the workplace for quite some time and had some real reflections on where they're working and what it's like. We also heard from about 70% of them were between that 30 and 50-year age range. So we saw that as a nice catchment of mid-career workers as well. And I'll share with you some of the results from the data. But before I do, let me ask all of you on the phone in our webinar, are you in your dream job? So this will be our next poll, and your answers are yes or no. Are you in your dream job? So take a moment and respond. And while you do, let me check in with Helen. So Helen, are you in your dream job?
There are days I would say yes and days I would say no, but in general I am, which may skew our statistics, but I am very fortunate to do what I do, I have to say. What about you, Andrea?
Well, let's see. To be honest, I don't think so. I'm not in my dream job, no.
What would be your dream job?
Well, fair enough, and obviously because I've been working on this so long, I have plenty of time to think about it. My dream job is to be the Director of Quality Assurance for the Massage School. I'd be dedicated to ensuring that each graduate's ability to provide high-quality massage when they graduate. That's my dream job.
I love it. I love it.
But not altogether sure I can make a living, so frankly, I'll take a dream company. All right, well, it looks like well over half of you participants are not in your dream job. Now that's interesting. If we were all around the table and had a chance to have a glass of wine and talk about it, it would be kind of cool to hear why and under what circumstances. That being said, this is what we found from our respondents. Very few reported being in their dream job. I mean, what's a dream job? Granted, it's different for everyone, but even if I could have my dream job, I think I would be hard-pressed to figure out how to articulate it, let alone find it. Well, when Lucy crunched the data 50 million different ways and did statistical sampling and so forth, she found that, in fact, being in a dream company seemed to have a lot more influence over the individual's outcomes and the business or the organizational outcome than being in a dream job. And we saw this as really good news because at the end of the day, those of us on this call have to acknowledge we have much more influence over supporting our organization to becoming a dream company than making sure that all of the 6,372 employees are in a dream job. That's not to say the work we do doesn't need to be top of mind in terms of how it's done, but frankly, it's the organization and the environment and the supports that are provided that is statistically linking to the positive outcomes that we think are critically important. All right. So let me tell you a story. Last year I had an opportunity to participate in the it wasn't national, it was the Midwest Business Group on Health. This was a conference in Chicago, and among the participants and speakers were winners of the American Psychological Association Psychologically Healthy Workplace Awards. So these award winners talked about their organizations and so forth. Well, one of the presenters was a real character. He was fabulous. And he was the CEO of a company called Tasty Catering. Now, if you're in the Midwest, you may have heard of them. Tasty Catering provides catering and food prep for events and so forth, and has been ranked a best place to work. And when the CEO talked about their organization, I listened and thought, wow, that's a dream company. And then it struck me, you know, I may have to make 500 turkey wraps today, but I'm working for a dream company. And for this organization, Tasty Catering, it has really had a positive impact. They have shifted from a command and control type of organization to more of a collaborative approach with shared accountability of employees. This gentleman goes on the speaking tours to talk about how this organization moves from that. They have an hourly, a seasonal, and full-time workforce, and every time they meet 3 or more people, it's required that everyone steps back and says the 7 core values of the organization. And it's brief, but they each run through it. This is how they instill a real dedication and commitment to what is most important to the organization, how they treat each other, how they treat the organization, how they treat their customers and clients. They have a 1% turnover in an industry that is more typical of 70%. They have a 98% engagement level using Gallup's tool, and as I pointed out, they have been identified as a best place to work several times. So clearly, it's not the job, it's the environment. And it makes you pause and think, well, what are we doing or doing well or could possibly be to do differently that could create an environment that would be considered a dream company? So let's talk about the impact of being a dream company. In our data set, as I pointed out, we asked plenty of questions so that we could connect it to some of the important metrics we know our clients need when they're sitting in the C-suite speaking with senior leaders. And ultimately, people want to work in an environment or an organization that enables them to be successful as individuals, and that means taking care of what's important at work and what's important outside of work. The respondents who identified being in a dream company were 11 times more likely to say that they plan to stay with their organization at least for the next year. 11 times more likely. They also had higher levels of job satisfaction, and this is telling us 41% were more likely to rate it an 8, 9, or 10 in a scale of 1 to 10 regarding their job satisfaction. We believe these kinds of environments don't just happen. They're designed that way. They're deliberately constructed in a way that provides people to be successful. And in fact, 3.5 times more likely respondents are to say that their job inspires them. And I'm pretty intrigued with this concept of inspiration. When you think about the kind of work that is being done and how complex some of the relationships and collaborations and global opportunities that we have, oftentimes it's an inspired employee thinking differently that can really help your organization go to the next level. So these are some critical outcomes, data-driven, of being in a dream company. We also found that respondents who identified being in a dream company were more engaged. They consistently put in extra effort at work. And the second one I really like, so let me read it to you verbatim. Regularly seek innovative practices outside my organization to bring back to work. This is one of the questions I love, and I think Lucy did a great job asking some important ways of how you approach the work that you do. And for premier organizations that fully expect to be competitive in the future, this opportunity to have your employees leveraging best practices, good ideas, and interesting connections outside of the organization and bringing it back into the company is going to be critical. And it's clear there's a very big difference when you feel that you're working in a dream company. The question of energy connects to resilience. The whole idea around having the energy to not just manage your work responsibilities, as you can see there's a 16% difference, but also to manage your personal responsibilities and how critical that is. We have got to acknowledge if your employees aren't doing well outside of work, it's very hard for them to bring their best selves to work, and that's the bottom line. So a dream company is a place where this is happening. And the question is how? What are they doing? I think Helen's going to share some specific insights from Bright Horizons' perspective that has gone through this process deliberately to learn about their employees and to identify ways to create a dream company. So let me take a pause and give a shout out to all you managers that are on the line. This is something I got from a quote from I read from NASA's Chief Human Capital Officer. Now I have to acknowledge some of you are on the phone and maybe not looking at the webinar, so bear with me. I'd like to read this quickly. When you look at who has the power to transform the organization, it's the frontline supervisor, given that they hire, coach, evaluate, and assign work to employees. Every single decision adds to a transformation, keeps you where you are, or in tragic situations, sets you back. I love this quote because it makes you pause and remind yourselves how important that supervisor, middle manager function is. And I flag it for you as you hear about and think about your organizational journey to becoming a dream company. Not only do we want our managers to be as successful and to be as good as heavenly possible, we also need to think about what they need personally and professionally to be successful. So I would ask, how are your HR efforts and what kinds of promising practices are you engaged in to support your managers on a day-to-day basis? And do you in fact know what your managers need? HR management is an important part of the equation for creating a dream company. So make a mental note to really explore that in depth, or needless to say, when we're done with the webinar, if you have questions, we'd love to take to answer some of those and have a conversation. All right, so what does a dream company do? Our data suggests that the respondents who were in a dream company felt like their organization cared about their well-being. And they also acknowledge that their organization provides opportunities to learn and grow in their career. So as you think of this data, think about not just whether or not you provide opportunities to learn and grow, or you have a wellness initiative, or more importantly, provide well-being supports. Maybe what you need to think about is, does your organization actually contribute to well-being in a way that the employee can really access? How do you demonstrate that this is happening? This data point from our perspective really underscores its value, and for some of our clients, they're doing it. So the question is maybe doing it differently or making sure it's happening throughout the enterprise and not just in certain pockets. And finally, people in a dream company identified that their organization promotes work-life balance. So I would ask, does your organization promote work-life balance? And if so, how is it demonstrated? How do employees know that this is a priority, that this is an acceptable way to be? Are your senior leaders modeling this? Let me tell you a quick story. I was doing leadership interviews for a pretty large company in the U.S. with about 5 very large work sites. So I was making the rounds, and I was talking with a SVP over a whole big piece of the organization, and he mentioned to me that he had just returned about 6 weeks earlier from 1 month sabbatical. And I was like, whoa, you took it? He said, yes, I sure did. I said, did you take your BlackBerry with you? Nope, I didn't. Did you check in? No, I really took it. My family and I, blah, blah, blah. Then I said, have you talked about it? Did you tell anybody about your experiences? And he paused and he said, oh, well, they know I went. And I said, well, yeah, but are you talking it up? The importance of you, an SVP over 35% of this organization, to honestly take time off is something you've got to model. And it's something that people need to feel like, wow, if he can do it and it's okay. Now, of course, senior folks can do what they want. I get that. But the idea that he took time off and he's boasting about the value he has brought back to the organization, these are the subtle things that create a culture that makes it perfectly right to have work-life balance, to have career opportunities, and to be able to manage your overall well-being. So, where are we? What are the overall benefits? I hope I've touched on some. Ideally, a dream company is by design. It's a structure, it's an approach, it's a culture. It's all about thinking of your human capital in terms of what do they need to bring their best selves to work, and what are the key parts of their lives that need to be addressed, and how are we providing those supports, and how are we measuring the impact? Because over time, questions will come up as to whether this makes sense or not, and does it continue to be implemented in this way or that way? And as HR representatives, we need to be able to speak to that. Benefits from our data set in terms of what employees that identified being in a dream company, it increased their innovation and strategic thinking, which is clearly top of mind for many senior leaders, and it improved their overall well-being scores and overall health satisfaction. Again, Lucy built on our well-being approach into this dream company and was able to capture important metrics we know are important. A lot of your organizations are probably in the midst of wellness strategies. Well, if you're a dream company, the overall well-being of your workforce tends to be a bit higher, and they rate their health satisfaction higher. So these are just some of the improvements to not just the individual, but also to the overarching business goals of your organization in being a dream company. And it's something that, in fact, needs to be customized for your workforce. So I have been able to share the data from our data set, which is US-based, but when we work with clients to do an assessment of their employee populations, some other subtleties come up. For example, one of our healthcare clients, who's in the midst of being in their journey to become a dream company, had an opportunity to identify sleep as an area of focus for their workforce, and has already begun thinking about the connection between not just the individual feeling better, not just the family outcomes to having an employee sleeping better, but also patient outcomes, and a very important metric for any healthcare organization. Suffice it to say, the dream company journey looks a little different for each organization, and it's important to understand what the needs are for your workforce as well as your business objectives that you want to try to address. But overall, being a dream company has a profound impact on the business and on individuals and how they feel and how they work and overall society. So let's get a little more specific in one company's story, and I'll turn it over to my pal Helen.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, as Andrea said, I think this is very specific to each organization. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey and my personal experiences at Bright Horizons. They may be different for another employee within our organization, and certainly they'll be different for you all in terms of what matters to you and what matters to your organization. But hopefully there'll be some ideas in here that spark your thinking. Please do keep those questions coming for us. It will really bring the conversation to life for us. We really want to engage with you in those. So I love this slide here that it's actually a picture from our head office here in Watertown, and I can literally say that I do love coming to work every day. It's hard for me as a person of British roots to talk in superlatives, but I would say that I really have landed in my dream company. I've actually been at Bright Horizons for 10 years, and I came to the company somewhat by chance and really didn't know a lot about our business. I'd been working in manufacturing prior to that and have just really come to love the place that I work and the people that I work with. And we've been interviewing recently for a couple of roles on my team, and it's just so easy to talk about what a great place it is to work. So I want to share some of the ways I think that we feel that and live that every day. I think a lot of it really is about the way that we treat each other and the fact that it's a safe environment and the fact that we treat each other with respect. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how that is embedded in our culture. So we have something called the HEART principles. These are our value statements that were created about 8 or 9 years ago, and many of you, I'm sure, have value statements. They may look a little different, but they hopefully are part of the way that you interact with each other. And they're really the how. When the mission is the what, they really are how, and they nicely fit into this acronym: honesty, excellence, accountability, respect, and teamwork. And you won't be able to read what's there on the left, but I've given you an example of the way these really break down in this one here. This comes under the accountability tab. We are problem solvers, not problem dodgers. Whoever receives a question or concern owns it until it's resolved. When the dirty diaper hits the fan, some people run for cover. We break out the cleaning supplies. It's one of the ones that people, that stand out to people, certainly because of the diaper reference. And it also speaks to another of our HEART principles, which is we never lose sight of the joy and fun in our work. And I think that, these HEART principles are something that, again, many of us have value statements, and I've certainly worked in organizations before that do. But in our company, these really are part of the fabric of the way we work with each other. So, for example, when you join the company, there's something that you receive in your welcome packet, and there's something that we have training and conversations around. And then I think the most tangible way that they come into play is the way that managers literally reference them in conversations, particularly if someone has got into an interaction that, for example, doesn't fit within our culture. Then we will often reference the HEART principles and say that just doesn't really feel in line with our HEART principles. Let's have a conversation around it. So it's a safe way of setting a standard for us all to live by, and it really is something that we do.
Helen, that reminds me of the Tasty Catering process of starting meetings by saying the 7 core values, because when you really do it, you kind of get good at doing it, and having that HEART principle comment is a way to just slow things down and give everyone a chance to, yeah, maybe not, and move on to the next. You're not penalized. You're just reinforced for, yeah, everybody comes back together and figures it out. So I can honestly say it is an interesting strategy for strengthening the cultural expectations of how we work together.
Yeah, and if you're not really living by them, then they become obviously a piece of paper. And I think that we make a deliberate effort to make sure that they're the way that we interact with each other. And I want to show you another picture of our HEART Principles wall, which is in our central foyer. If you ever come to visit, it's here in Watertown. And this is also actually a celebration of a group of new leaders who are graduating from a program that we finished last year. And you see the principles so beautifully displayed, and so much part of your initial welcome to our organization. And so I'll let you into a secret. If you ever are hiring with me, I will actually take you to the HEART Principle wall. I normally stay there for a couple of minutes with my potential hires and just get a sense of their reaction to them. And it's a great way of seeing whether literally somebody's a good cultural fit or not. And fit is really important for us as an organization. We often say that we hire for attitude and train for skill. And so we'll talk about the training in a second, but attitude is a really critical component that, again, I think creates this dream place for all of us to work in. So promoting a healthy culture and taking care of everyone's well-being really is a commitment we have as an organization. And just like Andrea was saying in terms of the pivotal role of the manager, it's something that we recognize does really start and almost end with those one-on-one relationships with the direct supervisor. So we do a lot of work with our supervisors on ensuring that they take care of their own well-being, and as Andrea said, that they really walk the talk. And so we offer, for example, well-being seminars. We're doing a lot of work with resilience leadership, developing resilience in our leaders. We offer seminars on stress. We recognize that for all of us, stress continues to be something we want to be able to work through and work with and mitigate wherever we can. So we support that role of the manager in all ways. And really, again, it's those miniature conversations that I may be having with my manager about my need to take some time off, or all of those things that we're trying to make sure that our managers are giving consistent messages around, so that everybody feels that it's a healthy place that they live and work in. So certainly well-being is a critical component of that. One of the things that I do with my team, although I do work weekends, I know it's not, don't tell my boss, but if I do create emails over the weekend, I typically do a delay send so that they don't arrive until Monday and they don't ruin one of my employees' weekends unless I need to. So these are strategies that we try to encourage in our managers to make sure that people are taking care of their well-being. So I want to transition to the second component of a dream company that Andrea talked about, which is learning and development. So I oversee one of our two training functions here at Bright Horizons. We have 26,000 employees, and all of them have access to this, which is our centralized talent management system. It's called Marianne Tozio University, named recently after our former president who recently retired. And she was a big proponent for learning and development, but really it's something that all of our leaders believe in. To some extent, we're an education company as well, and so we want to make sure that we are creating a culture of learning, not only for our clients and those people we work with, but also obviously for our employees. So this is a very tangible benefit for our employees, and we also offer through this CEU granting classes for employees, and then probably our flagship for our teachers, and we have 18,000 teachers at Bright Horizons, is our ECDA program, which is a nationally recognized qualification for employees where they can get a certification in early childhood education. We've had 2,000 graduates from this program. It's something that we pay for our teachers, for our teacher population, and they can also use that as credits towards an associate's degree. So it's, again, a very tangible benefit, and in a way that we really support learning and development in our organization. This centralized learning and development system is accessed by over 50% of our population on a quarterly basis, and I think yearly it's up to 70 or 80%. So it's something that people have 24-hour access to, and that we really try to make the connections for individuals to training and learning opportunities and the criticality of that. But it's interesting because we recognized recently that despite all of our best efforts, there was still not always, we felt like we were doing many wonderful things in the learning and development field, and we of course still believe that's true, but we felt that employees were struggling with how to navigate through and how to really understand the connection between where they're at and what their career goals are and how to get there. So on Marianne Tozio University, we developed this new platform relatively recently, which is called the Leadership Institute. And really what it does is it creates pathways through all the thousands of training courses, video components, self-study elements that we have on the university, and really demonstrates to employees how they can utilize this learning to help them get where they want to get at the organization. we show very strong correlation between employees who are succession planned through our organization and who've been cleared for this cultural fit that we've just talked about, and their success in their roles. So we so believe in internal succession planning, so this was a great way of demonstrating that. And you'll see there are 4 categories: leader of self, that's anyone, any individual contributor. And so again, making a strong statement about how we're all leaders in the organization. Leaders of others, that's our first line supervisors. Leaders of leaders, so that's those in corporate director roles or our regional managers, and leaders of organization. And within those categories, we have the idea of the entry level, the growing, and then the advanced. And so anyone can come to this. Everybody has access to all components here. There are certain things that are restricted based on role, but they can see what's available, so they have this transparency about their career path. And then they can really dig in, take the training programs. Of course, it's not a guarantee of promotion, but it really shows a self-starter, someone who can use this to navigate through. So this has been a huge win for us, and I think, again, sends a powerful message. And then the final thing in terms of learning, well, sorry, one more thing, and then I'll talk about coaching. But as I mentioned, we're really recognizing the importance of over-communicating potentially some of these opportunities for our staff. So, for example, for teachers, we've always had a very strong career path for them through to some of our senior roles, if that's where they'd like to go. And so we have many, many success stories of great succession, but we were finding that not all teachers understood that or recognized it. So the more we can use visuals, and this is something that's now shared with all of our new teachers, that shows these career paths, the more success we found in people recognizing that they have these great opportunities for learning and development at Bright Horizons. And then the final component that's something that's very close to my heart right now is the idea of really expanding our coaching program. And in a second, we're going to ask whether how many of you are also engaged in coaching. But we started this journey maybe 10 years ago and started bringing in some external coaches for relatively senior roles. And we just saw a very strong impact and a strong return on investment with our coaching. And so recently we've created an internal coaching practice. Myself, I'm being certified as an internal coach, and I'm coaching some of our senior leadership. And then we recognized that we really wanted to spread the value of coaching and the idea of helping people problem solve, helping people find their own solutions to problems through guided discovery. And so we're now expanding this to a Coaching for Leaders program that we're hoping to have at least 400 graduates of that program in the next year. So it's become a huge part of the way we're working with managers, again, just as Andrea says, to have those conversations and really be close to this development of individuals and help them feel that they've really got a home with us in our organization.
Helen, with that coaching technique, it seems to me it's also an aptitude, if you will. So you know how sometimes the best person at a specific task can become a manager and is not necessarily can make that next step for coaching? I'm not so much questioning does that happen at Bright Horizons as opposed to wondering, is coaching one of those aspects of management that not everybody can do?
I think some have many more skills in it than others, but I'm actually finding that it is relatively trainable. It's interesting. We did some coaching training recently with some of our more senior managers, and many of them were saying that it felt like writing with their left hand for sure. And I think particularly at those senior levels, we're often required to make decisions quickly and be quite directive. And so what, of course, I was trying to do was increase the range so that they still continue with that skill when necessary, but they also have that other skill of being able to step back. And so giving them permission to not always have the solution was quite eye-opening for them. So I'm hopeful. Well,
that's cool because one of the HR trends for 2016 is managers becoming coaches, or more importantly, using coaching skills in their management approach. So that's heartening.
Yes, I'm going to keep at it. I'll let you know. So we do have a poll now. And we're interested, just as Andrea is saying, whether or not you're seeing this trend in your organization. So do your leaders have access to coaching in your organization? And if you want to tell us a little bit more about it, feel free to chat in the poll, in the chat area with us, or again, ask any additional questions.
I think it's cool that you're establishing some internal expertise at it, because not all organizations obviously can hire coaches, particularly to go beyond maybe the senior team or high potentials.
Yeah, that was one of our strategies. You know, we didn't have a lot of money to invest in it, and actually I have to say I've experienced really positive reaction to me as an internal coach, and it's interesting because I put on my coaching hat when I'm coaching, so it's definitely as if I'm an external coach, but I also bring this knowledge of the organization that can shortcut some of the conversations. So so far it's been very successful.
So what would you say, Helen, to the quarter of the respondents that aren't sure? Who would they ask, and how might they explore whether or not coaching exists in their organization?
Yeah, I mean, it typically sits within the training. Our training organization sits within HR, so the training/HR function. And I do know many organizations who do have internal coaching functions. Sometimes they're a little bit more specific, a little bit more technical. So it may be related to, for example, lean manufacturing. There's often a coaching component to that. But I would start with HR or training to find out. Yeah. We had a question that came in from Carol about whether or not we would outsource or we'd branch out and coach leaders outside the organization for free. I think it's something we actually recently discussed at a senior leadership forum. So you know, I'd be interested in hearing what your thoughts are on that, Carol. But it is an area that I think that we have some expertise in for sure. Yeah. Great. So so some other things in terms of, we talked about work-life balance as the third arm of what employees are looking for in terms of a dream company. And you know, many of us really, it's not just work-life balance, it's really work-life integration. That it's hard to switch off and do one and the other. And so I think for me, certainly personally, it's been a question of trying to make it all work. And so one of the things I wanted to share is this idea that it's so important for us to allow our employees to bring their whole self to work. And we found that, you know, employees don't arrive at work in a vacuum. They come with all kinds of other concerns, all kinds of other wonderful things in their lives. And so connecting with individuals also on a personal level, connecting with them on what's important for them. There's some recent work that's been done with Google around teams and looking at what makes teams functional and not functional. And they did a lot of research, and at the end, it came down to whether or not people had a personal connection with their team, whether or not they knew something about a team personally. And I did some work recently with a team at Bright Horizons that was struggling with trust and all kinds of other issues. And I started the meeting with just asking people to share what they would do if I suddenly gave them a day off. And there was so much that was shared in that room. There was a person who said that they were a model railway enthusiast, and there were people in the room who said, oh, gosh, I just didn't know that about you. And so I think it's just even that very short 10 minutes built a different level of trust because they saw sort of the whole person. And so that's what we're encouraging, what we'd like to encourage our managers and our teams and our organization to do. So one of the examples of this, and many of you probably do this, is this idea of the Bring Your Child to Work Day. And the picture on the left actually happens to be my two lovelies. That was on our Bring Your Child to Work Day a year ago. And our organization just pulled out all the stops. So you'll see they had just received a manicure. We actually have a manicurist on site that we as adults can pay for. But they did that for the children. And then so many things that really connected my children to the work I did, and I think helped them understand when in the evening I'll say I have to take a call or whatever it is that may conflict with the time that they want to spend with me. It really helped them understand the work that I do. And I think one of the most moving stories that my daughter told me afterwards was that she'd been in the mailroom. They did a wonderful activity where they went to see the mailroom and they mailed letters home to their parents. And one of the mailroom guys had stopped and said to my daughter, I know your mom, she's lovely. And this had meant so much to her to have this external validation that within work I was still a whole person. So it was a very key moment, I think, for her. And of course, they now both want to work at Bright Horizons. And I have to tell them that it may not be quite the experience they had on that one wonderful day, but it is still a dream place to work. But we don't get manicures every day. It has to be said.
Well, that's funny. Rowan did the same thing. She didn't get to go for Bring Your Child to Work because I don't work in Watertown. But when I brought her into work once, she's like, well, this is fun. This is what you do? Sort of.
The picture on the left is we have a wonderful policy again here in Watertown of bringing your dog to work on a Friday. And we were finding that we want to create, and I'm sure all of you are thinking about this, equitable benefits that talk not only to families with children, but also single employees or employees of different circumstances. And this has really helped level the playing field. And there are many employees who bring their dogs to work on a Friday. And it's a great stress reliever for all of us. And one of my employees recently had a new puppy, and I recognized we'd had 1,000 baby showers and wedding showers and all kinds of things. And so we actually had a puppy shower for him and for his dog. And so this is all about knowing what matters and what's meaningful to your employees and recognizing and caring about them as whole individuals. And then another aspect that we see in all the research for employees and for individuals, and specifically I think also we see this often in research around millennials, is how important meaning is for them and connecting to the broader mission of an organization and doing something meaningful. So any kind of volunteerism, I think, and a connection to that and a support of that from the organization can be really helpful in that regard. At Bright Horizons, we have a foundation for children that creates bright spaces in primarily homeless shelters, places where children can thrive and grow and have wonderful childhoods and wonderful experiences. And so our employees, we not only fundraise for the foundation, but we also encourage volunteerism both in setting up these bright spaces and then on an ongoing basis. This picture is from actually our Solutions at Work conference, and this is a combination of Bright Horizons employees and some of our clients who spent the morning working on one of our bright spaces in California, in the Door of Hope. And, we've just found that all of these ways that we can really touch on the things that matter to employees both at work and in their home lives really helps create that wonderful work-life integration that we're looking for. So the bottom line is, and I know Andrea is going to help summarize this, but the bottom line is really this idea of unlocking potential. And I certainly find that through the things that we've talked about and in general and with the employees who work on my team, this is really what we're looking for is allowing them to manage all of those other things so that they can really come to work and feel satisfied that they're doing the best work they can and they're fully connected. So it's certainly been a great strategy for us.
Well, and I would say the process you went through, integrating the findings from the well-being study that we did a couple years ago to inform this activity has really been foundational. Ultimately, I think that the idea of well-being is addressing those key concerns. And there's plenty of ways to tie back to the business outcomes why this is important. So it's not just working for a company that cares, which Bright Horizons clearly does, but it's also working for an organization that knows how to measure the impact. And the Dream Company has some very measurable impacts. The data from the study, I think, underscores that and underscores how you can either do what you're doing and continue to do it or do it differently or perhaps add something that is not being addressed by having a proactive stance on understanding what your employees are challenged to take care of on a day-to-day basis and how the business can impact that.
Great. Well, thank you both. That was wonderful. If there are any lasting questions for Andrea and Helen, please feel free to continue to send those through. We have a couple minutes left, so we'll get to as many questions as we can. But the first question that came through is actually more of a statement, but here we go, is I'd like to understand what aspects of a dream company relate to the company's strategy. So I know we touched a little bit on that about what makes a dream company, but in terms of a business strategy, if one of you would like to address that.
Helen, you want me to take it?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I think we did probably touch on this pretty much just throughout the presentation, but ultimately the business strategy undoubtedly includes your human capital potential. So the process of a dream company, which can include conducting, for us it would include designing a well-being survey that is specific to your organization, and that comes from having focus groups and interviews with your senior leaders so we can understand what the business drivers are, as well as in the voice of the employee, what they're experiencing, that's how they define their lives and what's important to them at work and in life outside of work. Conducting the well-being survey that has been customized and then analyzing the data, using that against your business strategy, you can draw some I think you would be able to draw some very clear connections to what they need to be successful and what you need from them to get the job done. So that's the connection to the business strategy. I wasn't able to talk about a specific company strategy because our original data set was a national data set. But when we work with specific clients, it comes down to the company strategy. That's a great question.
Great, thank you, Andrea. And on the survey data, we did have somebody ask about which industries were included.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, we heard from a lot of different industries. If we had a statistically significant number from any one industry, we would have shared that cut. But the types of industries included pharmaceutical, biotech, higher ed, financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, technology, pretty much across the board. It's not, as I pointed out, until the organization does their own assessment inside that you're actually able to be much more strategic as to what you may want to do or do differently.
Great, thank you. We had a few questions come in around the theme of well-being and bring your whole self to work. And this first question is, how do you define well-being, and how does or doesn't work-life balance fit into that definition?
And do you want to take that?
Sure, I'll take it. Well, first of all, well-being, think of it as a lens or an umbrella that can actually be overarching over all of your human capital strategies, because the idea of well-being is simply thinking about the needs of the individual holistically. And so that means identifying and understanding the challenges that they may have at work and in life outside of work. Some companies approach that using a life cycle approach or life stages. Some companies inform that process through the generational approach, but it can typically include relationships, financial well-being, career well-being, community well-being, psychological well-being. So that would include your rewards and recognition programs, the extent that you're feeling that your coworkers care about what you bring to the party. Since many organizations are becoming much more focused on creating high-potential teams to work together, diversity and inclusion absolutely would fit under overall well-being. Within that, obviously, includes work-life balance, which typically includes dependent care provisions, flexible work arrangements, and that kind of thing. But ultimately, if you aren't feeling good physically, which is your wellness avenue, that too is part of well-being, then these other aspects of well-being also will suffer.
Great, thank you, Andrea. And just to follow up on that, I think this is a good question for Helen. And what are some examples of ways we can help our employees with their well-being?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting area, and of course there's a lot of companies doing great stuff in this space. We have an internal well-being survey that's now integrated into our employee opinion survey. We now call it our employee experience survey. So it includes a well-being component and then a more traditional employee opinion survey. And we've been doing this now, I think it's for 5 years, and we've really every year we come up with some really interesting data that we use to tailor our training and our benefits approaches accordingly. So we look for correlations between people's self-reported state of well-being and then other things. So their happiness with their financial life, with their resilience, with their stress, with their health. And so one of the things we saw in the first year was this strong correlation between employees who are resilient and then employees who have a strong sense of overall well-being, which again we correlate to productivity, less time off, all of those good things. So there's a really important business correlation. And so then we very specifically drill in to, for example, this resilience piece and say, okay, we have a relatively resilient population, but how can we enhance that? So that, for example, was what triggered us doing resilient leadership training to over 1,000 employees, 1,000 leaders, really looking at that as a specific skill. And these are things that when you look at them are highly trainable. So another example is financial well-being. We saw a strong correlation with that too. And so we offer something called Save Smart. Our Save Smart program offers for our benefits, which are actually offered out of hours so that our teachers can participate, so they're often evenings. And they're really programs where we look at how to support people's saving, just basic advice on finance. And it's interesting because it's in some ways a scary area to get into people's personal lives as well, but we recognize again with this whole person approach that if we can help them in small and maybe bigger ways for their overall well-being, then we can really help them show up and be happy to be at work.
Great. Thank you, Helen. And thank you to Andrea as well. We're approaching the top of the next hour, so we appreciate everyone that joined us today, and we will send the recording and the slides just so that you all know that ahead of time. We are sending those out. But feel free to reach out to us if there's any additional questions, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.